Whatever you will say about Reki Kawahara, the author of Sword Art Online's writing, he sure knows how to create interesting worlds. In fact, when Shisawa Keiichi, the author of Kino's Journey, read the Gale Online arc for SAO, his first thought was, to quote a translation of him, "Why didn't I come up with such a setting?" Followed by, "I want to write a derivative novel that uses the SAO world and GGO as its stage." Then, after acting as the Small Arms supervisor for the second season of the SAO anime, Keiichi got permission to create a spin-off, and hence the series I'll be reviewing today was born. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Sword Art Online Alternative Gale Online. While being set in the SAO universe, none of the main characters from that series, like Kirito, Asuna, or Sainan, show up in GGO Alternative, except in passing mention. Rather, we have an entirely new cast, led by Len. Len is a Japanese university student who has a serious height complex, possibly due to the fact that she's 6 feet tall in a nation where the average height for a woman is 5.2. To escape her height woes, she decides to play a VR game, and switches from game to game until she finally gets a chibi avatar in a game called Gale Online. For those unfamiliar with the SAO universe, GGO is an FPS MMORPG set in a post-apocalyptic world. Oh, and it uses some VR tech called Full Dive, which makes you experience the game world as if your body was there. Anyways, after watching Len learn how to play GGO, get addicted, and make her first online friend, she gets dragged into a newly started competition called Squad Jam. And that's how the story starts, with a tournament arc, which is then followed by a bit of slice of life, and then another tournament arc. Despite Gale Online supposedly being a male-dominated game, the large majority of important characters in the story are female. We have Len, our protagonist, who seems a bit shy and not particularly competitive, but is highly competent. And, well, let's just say, don't make Len angry. You won't like her when she's angry. Then, there's Patohi, a playful and perceptive mentor, who's Len's first friend in GGO. She appears cheerful and frank, but has a sharp edge to her. As for the rest of the cast, we have Boss, Len's highly competitive rival, Fukazairo, a happy-go-lucky real-life friend of Len's, and finally M, a friend of Patohi's, and the only really important male character in the series, who embodies the strong and silent trope. Most of the character relationships here are focused around friendship and rivalry, so despite the large female cast, you're probably not going to get a Yuri fix if that's what you're looking for. Plenty of strong female characters acting badass though. Shisawa Keiichi is a self-proclaimed gun otaku, and you can really see his passion for them shine through in this work. He has a very good idea of the strengths and foibles of all the guns being used in the story, and that gives him a pretty good grounding when talking about the strategies using them. Also, he can't seem to contain his enthusiasm, so half the time when a new gun is introduced, we get to hear a bit about the gun's history. While not being particularly into guns myself, I still found this pretty interesting. In general, the descriptions of gunfights in the story are intense and creative, with players making full use of the environment, traps, vehicles, and even including some hand-to-hand combat. Although the stakes for the fights often weren't that high, as I'll discuss later, they were cool enough to draw me in, and had me hyped to see what would happen next. Also, more so than for the other stories I've seen talking about MMOs, GGO Alternative does a very good job capturing the different types of players you'd see in these types of games. You have the role players, the super competitive ones, the people just in it for escapism, hunters using it as a chance to get extra practice with guns off season, and the Japanese Defense Force using it for training. Seeing these different types of players and the communities they build really helps flesh out the world and build on the base that Reki Kawahara created. GGO has a tense, action-focused story, and while it is highly entertaining, it suffers from a slight problem, that the stakes for any given action scene are pretty low. At least for the 3 volumes that have been translated into English at the time of this recording, I haven't really cared about the stakes in any of the conflicts. If the protagonists lose, my only thought is, oh well, more's the pity. And if they win, it's just, yay, I guess. This would have been fine if there were focuses to the story other than the GGO fights, but all of those seem to be truncated. There was a pretty interesting dungeon raid storyline for Boss and her team, which could have got its own story arc, but was relegated instead to being a short flashback. Similarly, we get a bit of slice of life at the beginning of the 2nd volume to give us some time to get to know Len better outside of GGO and grow her character relationships, but that time is all too short. Rather, for the first 5 volumes of the story, we have a tournament arc, followed by a 2nd tournament arc, and then there's a 3rd tournament arc. So yeah, while I'm all for tournament arcs, 3 in a row seems pretty excessive, especially when there haven't been any other types of story arcs. I do hope Sigsawa Kechi has plans for this series other than tournament arcs ad infinitum. GGO is highly entertaining. I quite like the characters, and I do think it has a lot of potential. However, I do worry that Sigsawa Kechi doesn't have any idea where he's taking the series, so I can't fully recommend it unless there's been confirmation that Volume 6 is something other than another tournament arc. That being said, if you're into guns, then yeah, go read this. And if you're an SAO fan, this is a pretty decent addition to the series. Also, if you've already read GGO Alternative and are looking for something similar, go ahead and give Black Lagoon a try, which has similar levels of gunplay and kick-ass female characters. Anyways, that concludes my review. Thank you for listening. Cheers!